Welcome to the build of the hammer, modeled for a Dayton UM12 driver. So the first thing we're going to need is one full sheet of 3/4 inch MDF, a 4x8 sheet, and a 2x2, 2 foot by 2 foot piece of 3/4 inch plywood. We're going to take the cut sheet and transfer it onto the MDF. You can see I have it transferred here, and you can see I've labeled the panel, so when I cut it, I know what is what. I'll be using my rigid table saw, but you can also use a skill saw and a straight edge. You just need something that can cut a straight edge. Alright, and wood glue. We're going to need some wood glue. But you know what's better than wood glue? PL Premium. That's right, PL Premium is much stronger than wood glue. So we're going to be using both in this project, so you're going to want a tube with that PL Premium on hand. And I'll post a video in the description showing how strong it is. And I'll be using my Roby cordless brad nailer, but also clamps. You know, you can use clamps as needed. I'll be using them, or you can do the whole project with clamps. I'm just always in a rush. Alright, so let's get started. So let's speed this up. Now I'm cutting the 15.5 inch rip for the majority of the panels. And here we go. I mean, things are moving along pretty fast. This is my miter sled. If you have a table saw, you really need to build a miter sled for it. It's an awesome addition. And you want to make sure it's nice and square.
Now, to make sure that the blade is at a perfect 90-degree angle with the table, I use a digital protractor, zero it out on the table, slap it on the blade, and crank it until you get to 90 degrees. It's also great for 45s.
Now, if you want to build a hammer of your own, don't forget at the end of the video, I'm going to have everything you need. I'm going to have the material list, I'm going to have the plywood cutout sheet, going to have the assembly diagram. All right, now we're cutting the inner baffle with the plywood. That's optional. I use the plywood because it's much stronger. It holds screws much better than MDF. All right, now here we have the bottom panel, and I'm going to put a 1/8 round over on it. Now this bottom piece is going to be the bottom of the port, and you're fixing to see me take the baffle and put the same round over on it. And so when I install these and build the box, we'll have a slight round over in the mouth of the port, and that was the baffle sitting right over the bottom. And there you can see right there, baffle. And we're going to clamp it down and put that 1/8 round over on it as well. Now that's optional, it's just something I like to do. I didn't want any sharp edges. Now we're going to attach the port brace. This is the lower port brace, so we're going to attach it to the bottom panel, 3/4 of an inch off the front, and it's going to be flush on the back. So we need to find the center of it, so we're going to measure over 7 3/8 off of the left edge. The front of it is towards us, and we're going to make a line. And you can take that port brace and use it as a straight edge and draw a line. And then we're going to attach that brace to the right side of that line and just confirm that's the center. It should be dead in the middle of that bottom piece, but just confirm before we actually glue it. And then we're going to flip it down and brad nail it here in a second. And I'm just confirming that it's centered. And I'm just putting the glue down to the right of that line, putting the brace to the right of the line. I'm going to clamp the back edge because that back needs to be really good and flush. And I've clamped it. This is just my nail line. I just took that square to give me a place to shoot nails. I had a little problem with my gun. I would let a friend borrow it, and he had turned down the pressure on the back and it wasn't shooting all the way in, but I fixed it. So now I'm going to put the bottom and the back together. We're going to attach those two, brad nail it in. And now we're going to put the top on. And go ahead and brad nail it. Now we're going to put a side, just one side on. We're going to test fit the baffle here. Let's see. There we go, that's the baffle. Just test fitting it to make sure our overhang looks good before we finish tacking it on. And I cleaning up the glue as I go. Now you don't have to brad nail it. You know, you can clamp all this. Like I said, I'm impatient, so I always brad nail. And that's a look at inside the box. Now here I painted it because we're going to be able to see inside of that port, and it's going to be really difficult to paint later. So I went in and hit it with some spray paint now. Now I'm using PL Premium for this in this port because I do not want it to drip down into my port. And that at the bottom you see a 1 1/4 inch block that I used. This is just to get the spacing right. And I put that 3/4 inch piece up front right there to make sure that it was enough room for my baffle flush with the side.
So you're going to see a difference in what you're seeing right here in the cut sheet and cut list compared to what you're fixing to see me build. I originally built it with a longer port, and it had 2 port sections. I simplified the design, and by doing so we raised the tuning and gained a little more output, around 20 Hertz, about 1.5 dB, which is a pretty big deal. And like I said, it made this design simpler. So just kind of disregard this upper port that you're fixing to see on the build.
Again, make sure you use lots of PL Premium. It'll have a really good seal, and it will hold much better than anything else. And I just tapped it down there just to make sure everything was set right and flush on top. And this is the port, or I'm sorry, this is the brace. Now I did a window brace with I think I used 1 1/4 inch spacing, or there for my slats. You can do circles, whatever you want to do. You just need to have plenty of airflow between it and something that's going to brace the structure well. So now let's go ahead and we're going to cut out the holes for our driver. Let's draw a line from corner to corner on the baffle. That gives us the center. We're going to confirm it with a tape measure and make sure we're dead in the middle. And then we're going to nail the 2 pieces together, just tack them together. And put our screw in there. And we're going to confirm that screw is dead in the middle. So I'm cheap, so here I'm installing a DIY circle jig. I've been doing this for years. I've never owned an actual jig because this works perfect. So I'm going to use a straight bit on this. Here's a picture of it. And I'm going to measure half the distance. Like if I need, say, a 12-inch cutout, I'm going to go 6 inches from the outside edge of the bit to a mark that I'm going to make on my jig. That's what I'm doing right now. So if I needed 12 inches, I'm measuring about 6. I don't remember exactly what it was for this build, and then I'm going to get a test piece of wood. I don't want to put this on my baffle yet because I want to make sure it's exact. So I'm going to use that screw and just snug it down, and I'm going to do a test cut, and then I'm going to measure across it to make sure it's good. And it was good. So now we're cutting the baffle. Now you may not want to go all the way through this. You may want to go just enough to sink the edge of the basket lip. I'm going all the way through, and you'll see why in a few minutes. And make sure you wear a mask with the MDF dust because it is some bad stuff. Alright, normally I would have screwed those 2 or brad nailed the inner and outer baffle together. This one actually just I forgot. So I'm having to do them completely separate. And we're doing the inner baffle now. And this is what the driver's going to sit on and mount onto. And it's good to have your driver on hand, so you can make sure all of these measurements are perfect. I went by the manufacturer's, dimensions and got lucky. But, it's always good to have it on hand. All right, we're going to go ahead and put the baffle on.
Now I didn't realize my camera stopped recording, so you didn't get to see me glue the inner and outer baffle together, but I did use a lot of glue, wood glue, glued them together. Brad nailed it from the back, so they have been secured, and they're now one nice thick baffle.
And put some PL Premium in there. It's good to go ahead and seal all your joints with the PL Premium just because it's so strong, and I mean, why not? We've got a whole tube of the stuff, which is going to be plenty. So I'm using PL Premium on all this because I'm going around the ports, and also this is a lot of places that this side panel we're fixing to put on has got to have a good tight connection with. So this is going to kind of almost give us a gasket-like effect, and we're going to push it down and squeeze it in there. We don't have to worry about it running, dripping all inside our port and stuff. And like I said, it is stronger than glue. So we just want to make sure our edges are perfect, especially the top in that baffle. So now we're done, and we're going to start sanding. And again, this is going to be, we're getting dirty here, so we have to make sure we have our mask on because this MDF dust, when you're sanding it, it is bad. Do not breathe it. Alright, now you're going to notice, and sometimes I'm using some glue. And what I'm doing with that glue is filling any little small holes, or just going along the seams and spreading it out. And then I come back with the sander, and it kind of pulls the dust into the glue and fills up anything imperfections that may be there, kind of like wood filler. Just a cool little trick that works pretty well. It does kind of gum up your sanding pad, so you may have to flake it off. It kind of hardens up on there a little bit. Just going over my nail holes. It'll be less work later because, like I said, I'm going to sand it and pull that dust into that glue and kind of fill in some of those holes. And if I was more patient, I could have just clamped it and I wouldn't have holes. But yeah, it's not a big deal for me. If I was going to be using like Duratex, it wouldn't matter at all. I mean, they would be really easy to fill. You wouldn't have to sand them that much. Duratex hides a lot, but we're going to be going a little bit different with our finish than just a Duratex finish. And there we go. It'd be ready for Duratex right now if we were Duratexing. But we're going to do something a little bit different on this sub. So I've put the 45-degree chamfer bit in the router. And when I drop the driver in there, the bottom edge of that 45-degree angle is going to be just even with the lip of the metal lip of the driver. So it's going to look cool. And this is the hammer. So we're going to go ahead and 45 the entire box, kind of give it that hammer look.
Now when I say that Duratex wouldn't require much sanding, you still have to get it sanded nice and smooth, but we're going to have to go a little bit beyond that. Like if we can fill any bumps or imperfections at all, they're going to show in our paint. So it's going to be a much more in-depth sanding and prep process for what we're going to be doing with the base coat, clear coat.
Yeah, there's a few nails on this edge, but I'm just routering right through them. They cut real easy with carbide tip bit. So now I'm going to hit it with some sandpaper. Just kind of knock down those little edges from the 45s and just smooth it out. Don't want any kind of hard edge on this. And I'm going to be prepping this to paint because we're going to do a base coat, clear coat. So there's going to be a little more finish work than what you see here, you know, beforehand, before we get to the point to where we can spray our epoxy primer on it. Now, one thing you're not going to see me do here, but when I get done with this, it's going to be ready for like a Duratex, but you do want to seal these edges, and for that we're going to use a 50-50 mix of water and glue and seal the MDF edges. 2 coats would be more than enough. And that'll soak into the fibers and you'll be ready. And there we go.
Alright, let's talk about the edges of MDF for a minute. Now, they absorb like a sponge. That's why, you know, if you just try to paint over this with just a regular primer paint, it's just going to keep on eating and soaking up your paint. It's going to take forever to fill it in to where it looks like the rest of the panel or the MDF panels. So there's a really quick, easy trick. Just get some glue and some water, mix it 50-50 and brush it on. And what's going to happen is it's going to wick into the fibers. It's going to pull it right into that MDF and the edges, and it's going to seal it up, I mean, extremely well. So I mean, here we're just wiping it on. You can see, you can see how wet it is. You know, wipe it on. I'm using a sponge, let it soak up, come back about 10 minutes later, hit it again, and then once it dries, sand it down. You're going to notice when you sand it down, it is so smooth. It's going to be smoother than the MDF panels itself. And I mean, there's no doubt about it. You can tell that they are sealed, well sealed. And you know, you can paint it, you're not going to have any problems. And I'm going to be using an epoxy primer, which works much better than like a standard, you know, primer. But no matter what you're using, you're not going to have any problems. Some people use body filler, Bondo, and stuff like that, but the Bondo only sticks to the outside. It's not soaking into the fibers, and that's where this is better because it's pulling into those fibers. So when you sand it down, you know, you're not just removing any of your Bondo and getting back to the bare MDF. I mean, it's in there and it's locked in. So it works great, and it is, you know, it's super cheap. You've already got glue, and heck, water is water. Just go out in the ditch and find you some ditch water. Now you may notice there's a little something extra on this sub right here in this picture. I went ahead and I had some extra MDF, so I built a little stand that's optional, but I'm gonna do something kind of special with it. There's some tricks floating around to isolate a sub from the floor, so I thought, you know, why not? So that's gonna be on another episode, and I will link it right here. You'll see it at the top of the screen while you're watching this video. You can click on there if you want to build that stand and just kind of see what it does. Alright, and here's the response. This is the updated version, and you see we have a -3 of 17 hertz. It's tuned to about 20. And here is our cut sheet. So you can just take this, and this is going to be all the different cuts you have to make. Now, of course, you know, MDF is what we're using here. You can also use birch plywood if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm painting it with a clear coat base coat clear coat, and that's why I'm using MDF. And here's the cutout sheet. You know, you can just take this and transfer it onto your 4x8 piece of MDF or birch, or, you know, whatever wood you're using, and go ahead and label them and get to cutting. And here's an overview, and we're fixing to look at them kind of broken down. Alright, this is just showing the bottom piece with the brace or the port brace cutting through the middle and the measurement on each side. Don't forget, you need 3/4 of an inch from the front and flush on the back. And this is just a side view, just showing that that brace cutting right through the middle. You know, just measure equal distance, and I've got 1.25 inches is what you should have to get in the middle. And this is just a look from the front. Alright, now for the inside of the cabinet, I just lined it with R13. You know, if you don't want to use fiberglass insulation, you can use something else, but I just used T50 staples and stapled it. And here's where I did it. I did it on the sides, the top, and the bottom. I did not do it on the front, on the baffle, or on the back wall. You know, you don't have to go too crazy with it. Just line the inside of the cabinet. As for the driver itself, it is a DVC, dual voice coil. It has 2 voice coils. So they're 2 ohms each, and we want to get a 4 ohm load to our amp. So as you see here in the picture, we're going to take a single piece of wire, go from negative to positive, from one coil to the other, and then hook it up just like you have in the picture right here, and that's going to give us a 4 ohm load at the amp. Okay, so we also need to protect our driver below the tuning frequency. So this is going to be a refresher, or a quick one, from episode 7. If you haven't seen that, you need to go watch it. It'll have a much more thorough section on doing this, but we're going to select the crossover tab. X over is what it says right here, and that's going to bring us to this page. Now we need to set a high pass filter, and you see right here I have a Linkwitz Riley filter at 48 dB an octave, and I've got it set for 14 hertz. Now you see it starts to drop off just above 20 hertz. You can lower that if you want, but just be careful. Now here's some of the parts. You know, I've got wire. I like in-wall speaker wire. You don't have to use in-wall if you don't. I just like it because it's red and black. It's easy to see. Screws. We got our driver and our amp using the Bash 500 watt plate amp. You can use another amp if you want. I'm using a mini DSP, so I didn't need anything that had DSP on board. But that's just what I'm using right here for this build. I'll have all this stuff in the description with links, including other stuff like the insulation I used, and also the PL Premium, and anything else that you may need to know. It'll all be down there. If there's anything I forget, just leave it in the comments, and I can come back and add it to the description so you guys can find it. Alright guys, so the next episode is going to show me painting it. We're going to be putting the base coat, clear coat on, and really dressing this puppy up, and it's going to look awesome. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next episode. So until then, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the next videos come out and you don't miss them. That's going to be it for this one. I'll see y'all next time.